Right. I joined the RAF in 1941 in Leeds, having been intensely interested in flying, and in particular the Spitfire. I was about 18 at the time, and as soon as I was able, I was sent down to Cardigan in Bedfordshire for an interview in the old airship hangar there. I seem to have got through the interview quite well, and was sent back home until they sent for me, which took a few months, which I spent joining the Air Training Corps, and as a result acquired quite a bit of information on flying and aircraft. Subsequently I went down to London, and from London down to Newquay to start ITW, which was the initial training wing, where we studied quite a number of subjects, and eventually after about 14 weeks we were passed out and sent to Manchester to await a convoy to Canada. After an eventful crossing of the Atlantic, we landed in New York, and eventually I ended up in the EFTS, Initial Training School at Cairn in Saskatchewan. After several weeks there, being trained by the Boundary Bay Flying School, I was then posted to an advanced flying school at Weyburn in Saskatchewan to learn to fly Harvards. I succeeded in passing out there, and was subsequently returned to England for future posting. There were one or two intermediate courses, one at Brough in East Yorkshire, and then Peterborough, where we were flying Master 1s. The thing being with the Master 1, if you put 25 degrees of flap down, it resembled very similar the landing of a Spitfire. After this I was posted to Grangemouth in Scotland for an introduction to the Spitfire, which was quite a hair-raising experience. From there, having passed out, I was posted to 64 Squadron in air, and flew Spitfire 5s. This was at a time when the Germans introduced the Focke-Wulf, and it was rather a trying experience being in a Spitfire and being faced with the Focke-Wulf. But the Spitfires were altered insofar as the wings were clipped. The supercharger was cropped, and this resulted in an enhanced performance at low level. But it wasn't a happy experience to fly these Spitfires when you could be tackled by a Fokker Wolf. But we seemed to be used as decoys in those days to enable the large bomber raids to get behind the Germans into France and Germany. After being moved about from pillar to post, I was posted overseas, which meant being sent to India. There I joined 176 Squadron, which was an unusual squadron, A flight being Hurricane night fighters and B flight being bullfighters. But as a result of a large Japanese raid on Calcutta, the night fighters were totally outgunned, and we were left with 3 aircraft, which 3 of us flew. But these Hurricane night fighters were so overloaded with radio equipment that they were very awkward things to fly. So I was glad when the opportunity came to choose between going on to bullfighters and a newly arrived Spitfire Squadron 152. Having had quite a bit of experience with Spitfires, I didn't take much time to make up my mind and switched to 152 Squadron. One of the first flights I did with 152 was a squadron formation, which included Sergeant Cole, who was flying next to me, and unfortunately he had a mishap with his oxygen supply and crashed from about 25,000 feet. We were then sent to the Arakan, but we did not see very much action there. One instance was having to keep an eye on the island of Akyab in the Bay of Bengal, as the Japs tended to use this for refueling. On one occasion, George King crashed at a Burmese village called Mongdor, and he was captured. The squadron went down and strafed his aircraft and destroyed it. I subsequently met George King many months later. Where am I now? We were moved about quite regularly, and it was the time when the Japanese were retreating from India. They got as far as Kohima and Imphal, and we used to employ ourselves by strafing their camps. This went on for quite a while, and we also did long-range trips with overload tanks. We subsequently learned the best places to look for targets, mainly a place called Kaliwa on the Chindwin River. The Japanese supplied their troops in Burma by sea by using ships which came up the Irrawaddy, up the Chindwin and to Kaliwa, and we found there considerable dumps of fuel and various other war materials. I could tell you about Normandy here, but I don't know whether you want it on here. On one occasion, Normandy and I went down to Kaliwa, and we saw a ship tied up to the base of the cliffs and covered with a huge camouflage net. I seem to have a knack of penetrating these camouflage nets, and I decided to have a go at this ship. I hadn't the faintest idea what effect a Spitfire could have on the ship, but I thought I'll try. So I flew straight on as though I'd not noticed it, and did a circuit of about 50 miles, then came back on the same course. The guns on the Spitfire were loaded with high explosive, armour piercing and ball, and I thought if I could hit this ship on its waterline, at least I could make a hole in it. So I spent the time in this circuit calculating how long the guns would fire for, which was 25 seconds, and the range that I would have to open fire. And this is what I did. I did a sighter burst on its waterline, and kept the guns firing the whole time. And having reduced my speed to the barest minimum, I could empty the guns into this ship. I saw no impression on it until I was flying over it, when something seemed to erupt, but I couldn't been out of ammunition. I flew straight on and linked up again with Normandy, who was busily engaged in having a duel with a chap in a gun emplacement. So after that we went home, and next day we went back to see if we could see what we'd managed to achieve. The ship that I'd attacked was sitting on the bottom of the river, so so I was very pleased about that. But what to do about Norman and this bloke in his gun pit? So he had quite a pile of sandbags of this chap, So Norman had to come down virtually vertical to get at him. So I tagged along behind to spot results. But after Norman emptied all his ammunition unsuccessfully, we decided we'd give it up. So we saluted this bloke. We crossed over him at a very low level and waggled our wings, and the cheeky devil fired a burst up our backsides. But that was just one incident. After that we also discovered an enormous fuel dump that the Japs had imported, and we started a fire amongst these fuel dumps, and it was sufficiently big for the whole squadron to go down and deal with it. And I think we must have destroyed a tremendous amount of fuel. Those are two instances in the type of work that we were engaged on at the time. We continued to move from airfield to airfield, and eventually came to Tamu, which was on the Burmese border, and we were the first squadron to move back into Burma. Major Hoff might have a story to tell you about Tamu, but I won't venture there. Shortly after this, I was to be repatriated, but before that I was sent to a VCP school in India. The idea being that the American Air Force would probably prove to be a bit more effective than we were. One of the prime movers in this, I think, was Colonel Cochrane of the American Air Force, who visited occasionally in his Kitty Hawk, and I think it was his idea that some RAF pilots should be trained to operate as forward air controllers with the army. So after a few weeks of training in jungle fighting, we were split into what were called visual control posts. The CO being the RAF officer, an army captain, and sundry other ranks, including a radio mechanic. Having finished this course, we were told to go and join the army, 17th Indian Division. On inquiring where 17th Indian Division was, we were just met with blank looks and told to find it ourselves. So we set off from Ranchi in India and travelled by train as far as Barakpur in Calcutta, and switched to a train of flat cars which were going to North Burma. Unfortunately, there was a Chinese train going somewhere full of Chinese who spent the time during the night pilfering a lot of our equipment. Eventually we ended up in a place called Golundo in North Bengal. and then set off with our vehicles, which consisted of a Dodge 1500 weight, 3 jeeps, umpteen other ranks, and we set off to go to the Imphal Valley, which I'd been before with 152 Squadron. Nobody seemed to know where this army division was, so we just kept on going, and eventually we ended up well down the Irrawaddy River. As far as I remember, at a place called Moniwa. There we managed to find this division and linked up with them and started the move towards Mactila, which was a thorn in everybody's side in those days. We had quite a few brushes with the Japanese during this period, and eventually had a pretty hectic battle in Mactila, which proved to be successful for a few weeks, when the Japanese decided to try and recover it. We had to make do with whatever we could find, and virtually lived in slit trenches. There on the airfield in Mactila was a huge mango tree with a platform in the branches, which the Japanese had used for aerodrome control. They now used it for sniping, and we had a very hairy time dodging these snipers. But the RAF regiment were posted there, and they took control of the aerodrome protection. One morning, one Japanese decided he wasn't going anywhere and decided to continue his sniping, so we turned a Bofors gun on him and blew the tree to pieces. I managed to rescue his sword, which I eventually sold to a Yank for 300 rupees. We linked up with the army in several of their battles with the Japanese, and we also on one occasion it was decided that a major air operation would take place, described as an earthquake. I was given an official camera for this to photograph the results of this so-called earthquake, but I didn't judge it to be a particularly successful idea. We were then asked to receive 17th Indian, no, 99 Brigade onto a Mactila airstrip called Tabukon, which I did in conjunction with Wing Commander Thompson. From then on we moved from village to village where the Japanese tended to dig themselves in, and we started using an idea which I think originated from Colonel Cochrane in the US Air Force. This was called the cab rank, and in the event of a battle, 4 Thunderbolt fighters were allocated, each with 2 500-pound bombs, and they were to make contact with the RAF officer, of which I was one, and he was in control from then on. The idea was that we should keep the Thunderbolts well out of sight so that the Japanese had no knowledge of them, and when we were ready we would call them in, give them directions to do their bombing runs, and mix up a variety of strafing runs, and this proved quite effective, and that was the system that was employed from then on. I think it was the idea of Colonel Cochrane and Wing Commander Thompson. This carried on all the way down towards Rangoon. I was one of the first people to go into Rangoon. There was no one there, and the whole place was deserted, so I had the choice of multiple houses where I chose to live, and managed to find some very salubrious sites until the army came along and took over. But from then on, from that time on, I was due for repatriation, and that ended my efforts in Burma. That's all I can tell you. I'm exhausted myself.
Cup of coffee.
But when we were talking about Normandy, and we had this duel with this bloke in this gun pit. But Norman, at one stage we were moved to Chittagong, and Norman got the most surprising order to go and shoot down an American commando plane which was supplying troops. The Chittagong airfield had a bund round it to protect it from the river, and this American bloke, brought this commando in and hit this bund. Unfortunately, the commando's undercarriage retracted forwards, so they were bent backwards. So the Yank was told to bail out his crew and set a course on his pilot to the Bay of Bengal. Unfortunately, he pointed it in the direction of Calcutta, and Norman was directed to go up and shoot it down before it got there. That was just one amusing incident that I can remember. Unfortunately, Norman won't be here to remember it. Yeah, I think.
That's fine. Honestly, absolutely
You'll
brilliant.
have to edit it.
Edit